Hi guys, this is my first ever live video. Oh, I just unplugged my computer. So this video has been a long, excuse me, it's not the COVID, don't worry. This video has been a long time coming. I have been personally battling the Wyoming Department of Education and more specifically, the new BOCES, Powder River Children's Center, that is Northeastern Wyoming Board of Cooperative Educational Services in Gillette, Wyoming. So my son, his name is David, and he is a 16-year-old blind, multi-disabled child. He has autism, a sensory processing disorder, cortical vision impairment, optic nerve hypoplasia, a severe cognitive delay. I mean, he is a very multi-disabled person. So when I moved to Wyoming in 2015, he was put under what's called an educational placement. Okay, an educational placement is where the school can say they cannot educate your child, so they have the right to move your child out of your home and place them in a residential school. I was not given a choice of where this school was, when he was going to go, or whether he stayed or he went. So they placed him at this new BOCES in Gillette, Wyoming, November 5th of 2015. At that time, my son could probably speak about 50 words. We moved here from Arizona in the tri-state of California and Nevada. He was able to independently walk from his classroom to my car, open the door, put his backpack in the car, get in the car independently, shut the door, everything himself. 5 years later, my son cannot do any of those things. My son has regressed substantially. Now, back in 2017, I think it was August 31st, 2017, the school nurse wanted me to change my son's medications with their doctor. Okay, my son's in Wyoming in a residential placement. They wanted my son to change his medications per doctor in Louisiana. This doctor in Louisiana wanted to put my son on Depakote. So I told him I don't really think that he needs to be on Depakote. That's a seizure med. It's a bad drug. You don't want your kid on Depakote unless they need it for seizures. They made me put my son on Depakote. My son was on Depakote for nearly 6 months. In that 6-month time, my son was physically restrained for 164 minutes on record, in email record that I have. 164 minutes physically restrained between January 2nd, 2018 and February 26th, 2018. My son was put in seclusion in a padded room, a padded cell, in a room that's a padded cell with a steel door for 564 minutes in less than 2 months. In less than 2 months, 564 minutes. This went on for months. I had no say. They wouldn't give me detailed reports. They wouldn't tell me what they were doing to de-escalate my son. They would not tell me anything besides, David did this, so we restrained him. David did this, so we put him in seclusion. One day, after the nurse had told me he came off the Depakote, finally, after I think it was 4 months, they took him off the Depakote. They put him on Seroquel. He's still on the Depakote. He's on Seroquel. He was on so many medications, you wouldn't even believe that this child lived through it. So they put my son on Seroquel, and I was like, I don't want him. I want him taken off of these drugs. I want him taken off of him. I want him put back on the Risperidol, which is a bad drug, but it helps. It helps my son. So they refused. That's my son talking right now. He's home with me now. But I wanted him put back on Risperdal over and over. 6 weeks, I asked him, take him off the Seroquel. It's not working. One day the nurse says, I've seen so many changes in your son. I have seen so many differences. His time in restraint has went down. His time in seclusion has went down. Everything is getting better. And that same day, my son was put in seclusion for 1 hour and 11 minutes in a padded cell. He was put in physical restraints for over 2 hours in one day. I don't know if you guys have heard of Max Bennett in California. Max Bennett was murdered by his teachers. He was an autistic individual who was physically restrained in the prone position. Those are the same positions that they were putting my son in. My son that cannot see, he cannot speak, he cannot talk, and he was 5 hours away from me, his mother, the only caregiver he had ever had. So now, let's fast forward. February 13th, 2020. I was in Gillette, Wyoming working. I got a phone call on the 14th after I got off work from the cottage manager. She said, Crystal, you need to get to the facility immediately. A police officer is on his way. David is fine, but he has been assaulted. My heart stopped. My son is a shaken baby syndrome survivor, and he had been assaulted, and I had no idea, what happened. So I drive across Gillette. I get there, I run into the building, and she says, Crystal, David was assaulted by a staff member. The police are on their way. I said, what happened? She said, he was struck by his teacher for the visually impaired yesterday. I still have no idea what time my son was assaulted on February 13th. It's February 12th. Sorry, excuse me. February 13th, I was informed. About 6 p.m., I was informed. The Gillette Police Department was informed. And this assault happened more than 24 hours before. So I wait and I wait and I wait. I wait and I wait and I wait. The cops are not showing up. So I call them 2 times myself. Eventually, a Gillette police officer named Jerry Van Dam shows up. Jerry immediately approaches me and asks if I'm the mother. And I said, yes, I'm the mother. He then gets interrupted by the cottage manager, and she says, excuse me, I'm the caregiver. I'm the one that originally called. Through this investigation, let me do this again, investigation, because there was no investigation. The police officer and Carissa, the cottage manager, went into a room, shut the door, and left me in the hallway and discussed God only knows what about my minor child that cannot speak without my consent. Next, Jerry comes out and tells me, Crystal, I cannot do a real investigation on this because your son can't talk. That is a civil rights violation. My son has the right to have an investigation of an assault on him by a grown adult, just the same as anybody else. He never investigated it. There is video footage that I have never seen of my son being assaulted by Joe Harrison, his teacher for the visually impaired. Jerry Van Dam told me corporal punishment is allowed in Wyoming. There was not a crime committed here. There was not a crime committed here. I then was brought my son's belongings by the cottage manager and told I needed to leave the facility because the other children were going back in the cottage to have their meal. So I took my son, went back to my hotel, ended up having to miss work the next day. A week later, was fired from my job. My son was home with me for a month, and then I was threatened to be charged with educational neglect because I had not returned my son to an abusive school. At the time of the meeting to return my son to Gillette, they made several agreements with me verbally that are recorded that they never followed through with. In June, I filed civil rights violations against the school with the Office of Civil Rights in Denver. On July 9th, my son was kicked out of school. I was in Montana, and I got a 2-sentence email from the director of New Bosse's, Julie Cudmore, stating, due to ongoing concerns about your son's care, we have decided to, what did she say? We have decided to suspend services. The school district will be in contact with you to provide summer services. Julie Cudmore. My son had to be delivered the next morning at 11 a.m. to my mother, who has not had a relationship with him ever. My mom had seen him about 30 minutes in the last 2 years. I got home from Montana and moved with my son, and nothing has been done. The state of Wyoming is doing nothing to protect these children. They're covering it up. They're keeping it quiet. There is so much disgust and abuse going on in the state. It's like, I feel like Martin Luther King. We're doing the marches right now, right? Where's anybody marching for educational equality? Where's anybody marching for students like my son in Wyoming? Nobody's marching. Nobody's talking about it because nobody cares. Not in this state. They want to cover it up. They want to keep it quiet. They don't want to change. My son has been exposed to asbestos for the last 5 years. While going through the hiring packet for New Bosse's, I found a document that all parents and staff members are supposed to sign on a yearly basis saying they're exposed to asbestos. I have never seen this document until I found it online. So my severely disabled child is now exposed to asbestos for 5 years. He could easily come down with mesothelioma. He has regressed tremendously. It would break your heart if you heard the recordings and the way these people call it human error. It's human error that my son was assaulted by a grown man. It's human error that no staff member reported it. Instead, they turned around and they walked away. It's human error that all of these things have happened. This is human life. My son is a real living, breathing individual who has been nothing but abused by the state of Wyoming. I have searched and I have called and I have emailed attorneys all over the state of Wyoming. Do you know how many people have agreed to take my case? None. I have spent the last 7 months trying to find an attorney to take my case. Not a single attorney in the state has agreed because they don't have the balls to take on a corrupt government. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about little boys and little girls like my son who are ripped from their perfectly stable, perfectly safe, perfectly loving home and placed into a facility that's full of asbestos where they seclude and restrain. Could you imagine seeing your 11-year-old child tied up, physically restrained because he didn't want to watch a movie? Because he had a headache? Because he had a stomach ache? Could you imagine a student at 16 years old that cannot see, cannot talk, cannot express themselves, has the mentality of an 18-month-old child to be assaulted by their teacher for the blind? Assaulted, hit. He hit my son. And nothing was done about it. DFS, the only thing DFS did was send me a letter that said terminated. Cause, other, no explanation. And they signed it. Not a thing was done to anybody involved in the neglect and abuse to my child. Nothing is happening. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to change this stuff. One of these days, they're going to go too far. And there's going to be another Max Bennett, a student murdered at the hands of their teachers. And parents have no idea the amount of pain and anguish their children are going through because the schools will not communicate, because the state has given them the power to take your children. This is a true, real life story. I have all of the documents. I have recordings of these people telling me, you can't put those kind of expectations on us, Crystal. When you have a child who can become violent, we have to be able to restrain them. Why? Maybe that kid is being violent because you're violent. Maybe you need to learn about sensory processing disorders. Maybe you need to get educated, or maybe you should be prosecuted for 20 years of child abuse. How many more children are going to have to go through this in Wyoming? Would you want it to be your kid? Because I know what it feels like for it to be my child. My son David never deserved to be restrained, to be secluded, to be physically assaulted by his teacher. And my son David never deserved for the state of Wyoming to turn their back on him, for every attorney in the state to turn their back on him, for every teacher and every aide and every worker at New Boces and Gillette to turn their back on him and every one of those children. It's disgusting. This is not 1960. This is 2020. These children have civil rights. They have civil liberties. They have the right to a free, appropriate education. And an abusive environment is not an appropriate education. These children deserve to be loved, to be understood, to have compassion. And Wyoming, you're not giving that to my son. You're not giving that to children with developmental disabilities. You're not giving that to special ed students. You allow bullying. You allow abuse. You allow restraints. You allow seclusion. And I am going to be that voice. I will not be silenced. I will not be scared. My son will not be silenced because I am his voice. Who knows if anybody will even watch this video? I don't know, but I hope you do. And I hope you like it. And I hope you share it. And I hope you send it to Wyoming senators and governors. I hope you send it to the Board of Cooperative Educational Services in Gillette, Wyoming. I hope you send it to the Board of Education. I hope you send it to President Donald Trump. I hope you send it everywhere. So there's awareness brought to the abuse and neglect that's being allowed to happen in the state of Wyoming. It's disgusting. It is not going to happen anymore. It has got to change. If we can't stand for these children, there's going to be another Max Bennett. There is going to end up being a student murdered at the hands of a teacher for physically restraining them. They do not deserve that. They are not criminals. They are not animals. This is inhumane. This is not America if our kids can't be safe. Everybody wants to talk about the child trafficking. Yeah, that's terrible. But what about the children in Wyoming who are being abused on a daily basis, and it's allowed through Wyoming law? Educational placement is allowed through Wyoming statutes. Get it together, Wyoming. Put DD programs in public education. Put DD programs in. Educate your staff. Learn about sensory processing disorders. Learn about autism. Learn about how restraint and seclusion causes nothing but anxiety, fear, and abuse. PTSD, that's what it causes. It does not give them positive and forced reinforcement. Get it together, Wyoming. Share the heck out of this, you guys. My son's name is David Hampton, and he was abused in New Boces in Gillette, Wyoming on February 12th, 2020, and nothing was done about it, and no lawyer will help me. And this is his voice.